Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Anekdhara's 13th webinar. We have spent 1 year holding 12 webinars, and now this will be the 13th one. And we are thankful to all of you, all our panelists, and all the regular audience who are encouraging us with your presence in the forum, and also seeing the webinars later. We are a small team who set up it, and we're very diffident while setting up this Anekdhara. Are we doing right thing or not? But yes, having seen and experienced the last 1 year, I think we are proceeding in the right direction, and we propose to do a lot of other things which will be unveiling over a period of time. So this is an important webinar that we have conceived because we as former government servants were handling the subject or topic in different capacities and at various points of time. In addition, it is a thing which touches every one of our lives. When it is not all administrative measures, they touch us in every one of our lives. So we at Anekdhara had some initial discussion and had some conception about what the transparency and accountability should be. So we thought we'll just give you a quick introduction on that. But having said that, each speaker has their own previous experience and free to express their views, because it is a point which needs to be debated and not there is no conclusion that is arrived at, but the point which needs to be debated. And even if we have to increase the accountability, how do we take it forward is what we need to think about it. So the topic is transparency and accountability in administration, how to enhance it. So we as a team, we had some thoughts. So first of all, in transparency direction, RTI was a great step forward. So passed in 2005, and despite recent amendments which do, most of people do have some reservations, it is still a great act. And around 4.2 applications were received till around October 22. That's a huge number of around 1 million plus each year. And however, it is still a very cumbersome and a difficult process, in the sense a person has to apply, then he gets 30 days time. Then if he doesn't get the information, then he has to go then he has to go to the higher level, or he has to come, and if he has to come and see the files, then he has to physically travel all the way to see the files. So there's still a cumbersome and a difficult process in the transparency direction. And the act was passed when most of the government procedure was still in paper and pen. They were not digitized at all. But now most of the office procedures are digitized. So to improve this, reduce the drudgery and cumbersome, some governments have made some attempts, like Rajasthan's Jan Suchna Kendra of Rajasthan, where there's the integrated website which gives information. This is in the direction of what is that clause of proactive information sharing. But the Suchna Kendras are also static websites which give you information once for all, and then don't update regularly. So what we are thinking is, can this be supplemented with better with the technology? So we have nearly all government offices switched over to some sort of electronic record keeping and office procedures. Everything is now digitized. Most of the offices are digitized, and very few which are remaining are also, I think, planning to get digitized. So can this e-office working, which is a digitized office working, be integrated with information sharing with the public? That's the fundamental question. That will be a big step forward in the transparency direction. Next. So every information which, as per the act, is permissible to be shared, in which I can get the information, make an application and get that information, can it come onto the public domain? And as per some schedules, dates, times. So for example, a contract is there. Then after contract is avoided, so for some, there is some period of which it need not be shared. But can that be shared? And or something like that. A decision is made with reference to some implementation of a policy. Can that be shared? And then this information should be cataloged and made available in easily accessible form. So can the PIOs who are there working in the various offices be made responsible for making this information available online, digitized, so that everybody can share that, get that information? So this will in turn will help in increase of transparency, reduce time lag, and more importantly, reduce workload in the government offices. Because to process these 4.2 crore applications, there is a considerable workload which gets done, xeroxing or compiling of little more data here and there, and then taking from different sources. And also ease access to information, so that that information is available to me anytime that we feel like, or to any number of people. It is not only RTI applicants. And again, to be more specific, what is suggested above is only supplements the existing physical process, because there could be people who want to use the physical process for whatever reason. Either they are not comfortable with the electronic process, or they want to keep some record or whatever it is. So the physical, it's supplementary, but it will be a big step forward is what our thinking is. And where the panel members can add to that. Next. Accountability is another big topic that has been discussed and then still under discussion, and people have a lot of thoughts about it. So we are looking at, we thought accountability has a two dimensions. One is the implementation, another is the formulation or electoral process, and all the combined process of decision making, policy making, all that. So right now, for our perspective, implementation should be the focus as far as administration is concerned, because administration as a policy making body, it is answerable to the political executive for the policy it makes, and then the political executive in turn is accessible to the public or answerable to the public through electoral process. So which is much beyond the scope of this topic. So again, as two levels, performance of the program, let us say NREGA or a skilling program or any other program, and responsibility to an individual for a decision. Let us say he doesn't get a pension, or he doesn't get NREGA card or wages or cash certificates. So both need to be intertwined. And how do we intertwine that is what today we will be exploring. Next. So again, just to bring to the notice of the audience, Rajasthan government has put a draft in circulation, refers to both performance audit and grievance resolution. It has many limitations as per our understanding. It is doesn't use the technology as much. It's still a replication of something similar to a Information Act, where somebody applies, then there is a grievance mechanism sets in. That should not be the process, is what our understanding is. But it is still a great act, so that it makes still some answerability to somebody for some certain actions and performance. So it is in this context we are talking about a transparent system, responsive to the individual needs, performs as per policy mandates. And we have three eminent panelists who will be addressing these issues, and much more than that. This is what we as a team thought, much more than that. And we have on our panel Mrs. Gayathri Kalia, Dr. A. Ravindra Nikhil Dey. Sorry. So we'll start with Gayathri Kalia. Gayathri Kalia was a former civil servant, but has moved much beyond that. She started her career in Indian Auditor Account Service, moved to Indian Civil Account Service, worked in various ministries in crucial posts. But she left the service early and turned into an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, she has run quite a few companies successfully, and but the bug for public service has not stopped, has bitten her back, and she came back to the government through various mechanisms. And in her own words, in her work, thus in my work, MG NREGA, largest employment generation program, or DBT, largest benefits transfer program, or CSC, largest outreach program for basic essential services, or DDU-GKY, largest rural skill program, all have a common thread. How to work towards an SDG goal with focus on private-public interspace and with use of technology. So it is this use of technology to deliver services she has been focusing on, and she has worked on some of the largest programs of the country in different domains. And along with that, I also seen her from close quarters to implement public process in a transparent and responsive manner in different places. So she is now currently the Executive Director and CEO of the Center for Arbitration and Mediation Practice, where she looks at strategy and delivery to not just provide mediation, but also focus on training, policy building, and making mediation a mainstream, available, affordable means of conflict resolution and peace in the society. Now I welcome Gayathri Madam. Over to you, Gayathri. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi Babu. And thanks everyone, I think wonderful knowledge seekers who are here on a Sunday morning to listen to a topic like transparency and accountability. And I'm really thrilled to be part of Anekdhara. I think you're doing a wonderful job, and my fellow panelists. See, the concept of transparency and accountability, is something that I grew with my service. I joined service in '89, and the 1990s saw a huge amount of discourse in the development sector about transparency and accountability. And this discourse led to what we see today as 4 critical principles of policy development, not just in the government or public administration space, but in fact across sectors, be it NGO sector, civil society, CBOs, or in the private sector. And these 4 principles today are transparency, accountability, inclusion and participation, all of them dynamically interacting on each other. When we think of transparency, the concept of transparency brings to us the idea of ease of access to information that is rightfully belonging to us, and also in a relevant form, as well as accurate and authentic information. We, of course, celebrated in 2005 the passing of the Right to Information Act, although in many quarters in government, like any change brings its own doubts and fears and anxieties. It did bring its own fears and anxieties. But the idea of right to information goes back very long ago. And I remember when Right to Information Bill was passed, looking at the history of it, and I want to read this. The 1789 Declaration, that is the France's Declaration of Human and Civic Rights, says, all citizens have the right to ascertain by themselves or through their representatives the need for a public tax, to consent to it freely, to watch over its use, and to determine its proportion, basis, collection, and duration. So, and in fact, earlier to that is in 1766, Sweden passed its first Freedom of Information Act. And so the concept of this right to information is embedded in the concept of democracy, where demos, that means that the common citizen is considered to be the creator of government, and therefore has the authority to seek information about the government, to check over its policies, and to make decisions about the policies. So how do you then make decisions about the policies or contribute to policy making that affects our life without information? So the information and access to information in the right form, in an accurate form, in an easy form becomes very important. There are also a couple of dimensions to transparency. We normally look at Right to Information Act and look at the downward transparency, that is the state to society, very critical because it's also very difficult to achieve. But there's also another aspect to transparency, which is upward transparency, when citizens give their part of the authority and power to government in terms of, giving your tax information, your asset information, or if you're a receiver of some kind of benefits as a part of a political policy that we have all agreed to, then, giving details about your eligibility. And part of this also raises the question of how much information in the hands of government, and whether there is a big brother watching you, not necessarily to your comfort, or maybe to your goodness, welfare. But these are also dimensions of transparency. And the other dimension is how proactive is the information giving, and also the demand-driven nature of information, both of which is covered in our Right to Information Act. Although the recent reports of performance of right to information show that the proactive disclosure is not really in a manner in which is useful, and some of which Anekdhara mentioned. But it is also seen as a precursor to accountability. So without information, you do not have enough information to demand accountability. I look at accountability in this way, that is the right to demand answers and the capacity to demand answers. And the capacity to demand answers is underpinned by transparency. And a very important sub-component, another component of it is the right to impose consequences or sanctions. So to me, the continuum of transparency and accountability is, on one end, there is information that's available, but not really leading to accountability. And then there is a middle of the spectrum, which is about the capability to demand answers, right? So there is a acceptance of answerability, but may not be linked to accountability or consequences. And it's at the end of the spectrum. So can you impose sanctions? For example, my own service, we put out audit reports or give it to the parliament. But how much of that leads to consequences or sanctions is a question that it is out there. So therefore, the intertwining of transparency and accountability and thinking one leads automatically to another, evidence doesn't show it. But the fact that transparency is a necessary, if not a sufficient condition, is, I think, well understood and well accepted. Now, having said that, I want to very quickly take you through our experience in MGNREGA, which in Andhra Pradesh, the erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, where the concept of transparency and accountability was part of the design from get-go. Both NREGA, the Act, and the Right to Information Act are twins. They were born in 2005. And in erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, we had a wonderful officer called Mr. Raju. And I happened to be part of what they call the Strategic Performance and Innovation Unit, but more importantly, very much drawn by the dynamism and the pro-poor focus of Mr. Raju. And we set out to ask this question right from the beginning, from looking at Right to Information Act. How do we make MGNREGA powerful in terms of transparency and build in systems of accountability, which when they feed into each other? So the design framework right from the beginning looked at also technology, because we felt that in order to make the information available out there and stopping and removing officers themselves from being the firewall to information, we needed technology. So we put in what was considered to be the first ERP, where end-to-end the project implementation and monitoring was facilitated by technology. And the design framework looked at what will go in the hands of the citizens, even if they could not read it, but they had a piece of paper like a job card, which had their rights and entitlements, which had a wage slip, which they could take to somebody else and show what they were supposed to receive and have they received. And also to look at information that somebody who would do a social audit or an NGO or civil society person who wanted to engage would then be able to download without having to visit a government office. So the design framework drew its inspiration from MKSS. Nikhil Dey still is a big part of our learning. Aruna Roy and Nikhil Dey came in, their work informed us. And therefore we designed it for reports that would be of value to social audit, that is citizen-led audit. So the technology itself became the design framework of putting transparency at the center, informed technology. The other aspect, which is a very critical part of accountability, but normally is outside of the system, is bringing public finance accountability. So not only was the program implementation part of the technology system, but it combined itself with the financial accountability, where, I have audited where one block has 200 bank accounts. And most people do not know what happens, and much of the money gets siphoned off or becomes part of a money lending system. Now, bringing these two systems together in a large public workfare program made sure that where the money came from and how it is spent, and that the fact that the money is available or not available can be traced to a trail and directly linked to wage payment, that the trail went up to the last mile, was a critical part of the design framework. And the third element was building the social audit system. The design of the social audit system itself brought in civil society organizations right from the state level to the district and the block level. There were representatives from NGOs, a resource person, and from the village, people of the village. And more at that point of time, the design included that they were job card holders. There were people who would have accessed NREGA workers to become village level auditors. So all of this put together informed both transparency and accountability. But some of the learning that I got from there was a lot of information, but information per se did not lead to understanding of that information or access of information. So we had a whole lot of programs to show the civil society organizations, show even legislators, the local legislators, parliamentarians, panchayat leaders, and how to read that information, where they can go and how they can download it. It also required a huge amount of infrastructure support right at the grassroots level. So the Mandal computer centers were set up and data entry operators were hired so that the information flow and the use of technology was not limited to the higher levels, and it could go right down to the closer to the people. It was also supplemented at that point of time with wall paintings and Jansun voice. At the same time, did it lead to accountability? So when we looked at the availability of information combined with social audit, you found that people got more information. They understood about their rights. They understood that they had to receive X amount of wages. They understood that they had to get 100 days of work. But what happened if the supply system was not capable of delivering it? So when we started off, we could deliver about 13 days of work, which was still highest among the state. But I think at all times, except for focused geographical intervention or certain people, it was about 45 to 50 days of work in erstwhile Andhra Pradesh at a peak. So what happens when the supply side is not capable in terms of its resources or capacity to deliver work? And what happens when the supply side does look at the provision for compensation? If you did not deliver work, there was a demand, but you still did not pay it. What did the people have the power to enforce accountability? I didn't see that. And I don't see that even today when you look at the fact that you have, ACER reports, and you look at a public health care system. You look at the fact that in a primary school, children of 8th standard cannot pass tests of mathematics or read or comprehend books of 2nd standard. So the accountability system seems to work very well when supported by NGOs like MKSS but an accountability system propelled by citizens works, I see, at a time when there is a huge amount of action at a point in time, episodically. The challenge is, how do we convert this into something that is systematic? How does it become systemic? And the other question I want to park and close is that how good are these accountability frameworks if there is a state or if there is a government system which does not react or respond to it, right? I remember that when 2008 or 9 amendments to RTI was being done, that there was so much of gathering against it, and the government responded. And the 2019 amendments have been passed without a whisper. So what is the power of citizen accountability or social accountability or any accountability if the supply side does not react or respond? So I'll stop here, and then perhaps we'll take questions and discuss more later.
Thank you, Gayathri. That's quite a wonderful exposition on both defining what is transparency and accountability, and also how you used it or how you ensured it in designing one of the largest employment programs in the world. And as far as I know, it is the Andhra model which was replicated at the national level, and so that has become a torchbearer for a kind of inclusiveness or and also for transparency for various other programs. Okay. With this, we'll go to the next speaker, Sri Nikhil Dey. Sri Nikhil Dey, after being educated at well-known institutes, both in India and abroad, like Lawrence, the Delhi University, had a comfortable life, but he decided to jettison all the comfort and to live in rural parts of the country. According to one blog post, he is stated to have said, quotes, that growing up in urban India cut him off, as it has the rest of the 300 million odd who live in large metropolises from the rest of the rural India. When shifting to the US, he says it took him 3 days to adjust to the new environment, whereas it took him much longer when he stayed at a village for the first time. In many ways, this shift was a search for his own roots. Having started his journey with Kedut Mazdoor Chetana Sangatana in Madhya Pradesh, he joined Aruna Rai and Shankar Singh in 1987 to go to Devdungri in Rajsamand district in Rajasthan, where along with many others, they helped form and establish the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan in 1990. Since then, it has been a connected life with the rural India, but also with administration, because most of the rural Indian problems are related to administrative work. In addition to working for MKSS, he works for Suchana Evam Rozgar Adhikar Abhiyan, NCPRI, National Campaign for People's Right to Information, MJ Narega, Lokpal Bill and Right to Food. In addition to the above, he is active in Jawabdehi Andolan and campaigns for launch of Accountability Bill, an agitation launched by MKSS across Rajasthan. It is incidental that Rajasthan has the first draft of the Accountability Bill, which is still to be passed as a law. Sir, over to you, Nikhilji. Thanks for accepting our invite, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Ravi Babuji, and thank you, Gayathri ji, for a very, very illuminating and very detailed exposition on where transparency begins and where it leads to accountability. And I think this connection between the two are extremely important. I will refer to both some of what Gayathri ji said and some of what the Anekdhara's presentation at the beginning. So I will, in these, there's at the end of what I'm going to say, I'm going to show a 4-5 minute film, primarily because it's very important, I think, from my point of view and what I have to present today, to say how much people really want to, need to, and have no choice but to raise these issues for their own survival. And therefore, a lot of the learning that I have had certainly has come from there. I realize that the group of people who I am now, this will put on a little later, if it's okay, the film. For now, I think we can just keep on the great general view, and I'll just, towards the end, just end with this film, not end with it, but come back to the film. So the best possible way I can do that, I think, is to give you a kind of a very powerful way in which people have expressed their own understanding about transparency, right to information, accountability. And the best possible way that even unlettered people who have never been to school or college or haven't had literacy, but certainly have a form of understanding, knowledge, and education, and a very sharp understanding of what their own lives mean and what it means. I think that's a more powerful way and a more illuminating way for us to be able to talk to this particular audience that has so much experience, I think, in matters of administration. But I think that the different points of view which we come to these kinds of issues is very important. So when RTI got raised, firstly, it was not an Aruna Roy, a Nikhil Dey, or even a Shankar Singh who raised the issue of RTI. It was ordinary people. And where did they raise it from? From the simple muster roll. So in fact, when in the early 90s, the issue of RTI came up, it was from this issue of muster roll dikhao. Now, Gayathri ji showed us how much technology helped us to be able to show that must roll. But people came to that from a series of agitations where they were asking for their full wage for having done their full work, and they were not getting that wage. And when they started to demand that and contest it, they were told, but you haven't worked enough, and that's in the records, and you can't see your own records. So the first slogan that came up was, in those records is our money, hamara paisa. And out of that came the slogan, hamara paisa, hamara hisab. Now, those 4 words actually describe transparency. They describe immediately that it's not transparency for some kind of voyeuristic pleasure, but it's transparency for their own accounts and their own accountability. And it also immediately led to them putting that in the public domain and moving towards what we later saw as social audit, but was initially just Jan Sunwais in public hearings. Another very important slogan from our point of view, and to do with this transparency and accountability debate, because it's been there for centuries, again, from which point of view are we going to look at it, was hum janenge, hum jiyenge, the right to know, the right to live. Again, it's a very strong conceptual issue that I want to know so that I can get my wage in the must roll, I can get my rations from the ration shop. If I don't know, I can't get my medicines from the free medicine scheme or from the hospital. If I don't know, my land will be taken away from me without my getting my proper due as per the law of the land, which may be the land acquisition law or any other law. Projects may come which may drown me out. There is just no end to the range of things that or for women's security and safety. So I will show you the kind of journey that people themselves have taken in this to come from transparency to accountability. Now, very briefly, I want to refer to what Ravi Babu showed us when he talked about Jan Suchna portal. Jan Suchna portal itself, Ravi Babu, is not static. That is its strength. It is firstly, it's not a Kendra. It's a portal. There needs to be Kendras, and which are not there. It was a portal built out of a lot of pressure that came from civil society at the end of the first Jawabdehi Yatra, which lasted for 100 days. And just in 2 lines to give you an idea, it came out of because, as Gayathri ji mentioned and you mentioned, that when RTI was there were mainly paper records. And then the government started digitizing everything. But instead of opening everything through digitization, they started closing it off and using digitized information in very, very fundamental ways for people's lives. So we came across thousands of shikayats and complaints while we were doing the Jawabdehi Yatra about pensions having stopped, not having come for months. And initially we thought it was just delay in pension payments. And it took us a 22-day dharna to come up with the list of what the government was calling stopped pensions, which were basically because people had not managed to Aadhaar link their accounts or had not managed to switch to bank accounts or various other digital related things. And there were 12 lakh stopped pensions in the state of Rajasthan, which at a time was not when they had. Today, there are many more pensions, but they were much smaller. So when we asked for that record, which was not in public domain, we found that it had shown 2.5 lakh people were dead. That's why it was stopped. Another 2.5 lakh was shown as duplicate. That's why it was stopped. And then there was this strange category called Anya, anything else. So people said, show us that 2.5 lakh. And we took from where I live in Devdungri, we took our Devdungri records, we took our Panchayat Kushalpura records, and we took our block Bheem records out of that 2.5 lakhs. And out of the 11 shown as dead in Devdungri, 9 were alive. Out of the 54 in our Panchayat shown as dead, more than 40 were alive. And their pensions were stopped. So it was a way of digitally killing them. So I just want to say that technology has many, many things we need to watch out about. Of course, today there are 98 lakh pensions, actually more than 1 crore now, that are distributed digitally and through direct benefit transfer. But in that, what we keep saying is that there are 2 lakh pensions that bounce because the bank number is not correct, because something else is there, what is called even in Narega as rejected payments. Now, those are 2 lakh families. And if we are not careful about the accountability of every single person, you as pensioners or you as government servants know how important your salary is, and people survive on this. So somewhere in that accountability question, is that hum janenge, hum jiyenge? Is that hamara paisa, hamara hisab for every single individual, individually and collectively? So the Jan Suchna portal was born on the idea of three things. Firstly, that all information on Jan Suchna portal will be transaction based. What Narega, what Gayathri ji talked about, an information system, what we started calling a Janta information system, and which in fact Narega was a gold standard in its MIS. It's no longer a gold standard, but was a gold standard in making everything open. So number one, that it will be transaction based. Number two, that it will be online. But there will be also other things to supplement, like Gayathri ji talked about wall paintings. And number three, that it will be open. Today, the biggest problem and the biggest leap forward of the Jan Suchna portal is that it says just what Ravi Babu said, that it is not, it is what the RTI Act, the Section 4 of the RTI Act says, that everything that you may have to apply for should actually be made proactively available if it is there with government. And therefore, you should not have admin logins. And if you have admin logins anywhere for seeking information, those admin logins must be justified as per Section 8 of the RTI Act, which shows exemptions, that there is a reason as per the exemption that you are blocking people from accessing information. That one single step, my suggestion is to all of you, please do one day have on proactive disclosure a whole discussion, maybe with some more technical people, because what Jan Suchna portal has done, today there are 12 crore accesses that have been made to Jan Suchna portal in just over 2 years. And there are more than 13 crore bits of information that have been accessed. So all those, as you said, each one of those RTI applications, how many, even if 5% of those were to be RTI applications, how many have you saved and how much information have you, and it's just an information portal. It does not provide anything else. So that gives you an idea of how much it's used and necessary. And even administration people have been to say that we use Jan Suchna portal rather than anything else. So sometime do a presentation on that. Karnataka has tried to do the same thing in something called Maiti Kanaja, and its principles are very important. I think that's something to learn. I will now move towards accountability because again, it's a question of time and I don't want to take too much time, but that's very important. And I'll start with someone who from all of you will definitely know, Mr. Shankaran, who, as Gayathri ji talked about Mr. Raju, but I think there's one level where the Mr. Rajus or the Mr. Reddy Subramaniam, all of you in the administration, there's another level where there's kind of a fountainhead of sensitivity and understanding of where things came from. So when we started the RTI thing, Mr. Shankaran used to be our host in Hyderabad. And we used to go, and he was somewhat skeptical in his own particular way, that he said, you know, yes, all of you, he wasn't completely skeptical. He had been to us when we were fighting our battles as Secretary Rural Development. But he said, how much will this do? And after 3-4 visits, he came up with one term that we use very, very much, and it enhanced our understanding a lot. He said, RTI is a transformatory right. It helps transform that bit that Gayathri ji said, that are you really able to use your information? Are you really able to get where you want to get? Is that information being able to equip you enough? It's necessary, but is it sufficient? But you cannot fight a battle without RTI. And RTI helps transform that entire chemical scenario that exists, in a sense, related to information and accountability and the delivery of services. So in that, again, like I said, Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab is almost what is social audit? It's Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab. We look at our money and we take the accounts for that. And what, along with social audit, actually, Amitabh Mukhopadhyay, another person who Gayathri ji might know because he was a very senior audits and accounts service person who's died. He came to one of our early Jan Sunwais. He saw 3 of them and he said to us, You know, the origin of the word audit is the Greek word audir, to hear. So what this Jan Sunwai is doing is going back to its roots, the roots of audit, which is why actually Jan Sunwai naturally evolved into a social audit process. And that social audit process is both transparency and the transformation towards accountability. Without that last part properly tied up, Gayathri, which you say necessary outcomes. Neither does the audit and account service officers, audit paras reach where it should. And nor do the social audit paras reach where they should. And that's why this accountability law is an attempt. Nothing is ever perfect. There will always be attempts to improve, but is a bottom-up effort to try and bring this entire range of many things that we have learned. And I think India is far ahead of the world. And despite a very, very regressive set of policies of the central government on transparency and accountability against the RTI, everything else, there are huge, this genie is out of the bottle. And even if freedom of speech and expression is curtailed at a grassroots level, people will not stop. So these various issues I want to go through back to 2011 when and I'll just very quickly finish that and then we can see the film and end, is when in 2011, the Lokpal bill was being brought. And some of us from the National Campaign for People's Right to Information, we were all part of the same team initially drafting both whistleblower and Lokpal bill. We had severe differences with the draft Jan Lokpal. And the reason was it was a completely top-down police investigating agency. 11 people who were supposed to sort out the entire country. We know what's happening with ED, CBI, everything else, misuse of those powers. The Jan Lokpal would have been a disaster because within that was things like you can search without warrant, you can arrest without warrant, you can tap anyone's phones, you can do whatever you like because you are the good guys. And the good guys actually, as we all know, ask anyone in a village who are they most scared about misuse is police. So if you give the police even a bigger danda, then where are you going to end up? So we started talking to some Dalit youth in our area with whom we were fighting against Dalit atrocities. And we said, for you, what does accountability mean? Because that's what we were looking for. And they said, no, we are just youth, we are school, college kids, what do we know? And they called us for Ambedkar Jayanti in 2011. And we said, tell us in Bhilwara. So these are now called the Bhilwara principles. And I'll just go through them very quickly because it'll give you what's in our accountability law as well. They said, सबसे पहले तो हमें जानकारी चाहिए. Not सूचना, जानकारी. Not propaganda, जानकारी. Not something you throw at us, but what meaningful information for us. So again, it's something that goes back to what Gayathri ji and Ravi Babu said, information that really matters to people, that will help change. So they said in this SC/ST Atrocities Act, who do we go to? What exactly are provisions? What are the datelines? What if they are not met? That information itself we don't have. Then they said, जानकारी भी हो, सुनवाई किसी की नहीं होती है इस देश में. And I'm speaking in Hindi, but I'm translating as I go along. So I hope that there will, if there's a problem. So sunwai nahi hoti, and what did they mean by that? They said, yes, we go to a collector's office and he said, हाँ सुन लिया, I've heard you. Now go. That's not a sunwai. In my words, with a dated receipt, you hear me. Today on the phone, there are a million phone systems. Every state has a phone system. Person says something, that person writing on the other end doesn't even understand that dialect. What comes about is something quite different. What gets sorted out is something different. So in my language, a dated receipt. Then they said, sunwai bhi hoti hai, to karwai ki koi guarantee. And that's completely true. There is no time limit by which my issue will be sorted out, which I'll get an ATR. It could be a month, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. And this is not a question of state capacity. You have no business to have a state if you cannot answer someone's grievances in a time frame. It's not necessary that you agree with them, but you have to give a reasoned answer. So within a time frame, if yes, by when? If not, why not? The fourth they said is, कार्रवाई भी हो जाए, तो एसपी साहब और थानेदार साहब और सरपंच साहब बैठ के कहते हैं नहीं, यहाँ कोई पिटाई नहीं हुई. अरे पिटने वाला मैं हूं और पीटने वाला मेरा पड़ोसी है, पूरा गांव देख रहा था, और आप हम किसी से भी ना पूछे आप बैठ के कह रहे हो दम नहीं. So भागीदारी होनी चाहिए. There must be participation in the entire process. So that's the fourth. The fifth, they said, is देश में सबसे पहले पिटने वाला तो शिकायतकर्ता ही होता है. The first one to be attacked is the complainant themselves. So you need suraksha. As you all know, more than 100 RTI users have been killed because they've pursued information. They are whistleblowers. You have whistleblowers from within, but RTI users today are whistleblowers from outside. And they've been killed, and even the Whistleblower Act has not yet been notified. So that's itself a form of accountability. And last, they said, and this is something we worked out with them, is that the Jan Sunwai Manch, where government is there, where in social audits we see, where the officers are there, where the people are there, where everyone is there. Everyone gets together and puts an institutionalized democratic platform forward. Now, today, if you see the CNAG auditing standards, they mention the Bhilwara principles, social audit standards. And they say that these principles will inform the entire social audit process, and each one of them have been taken. When we have done drafting, both of RTI and of this, RTI, again, we use people's thoughts because they understand it on their skin. And here, if you see the original draft which the government committee made, it has specific mention of the Bhilwara principles in the state government committee. I completely agree that today, I want to say two quick things and end. One is that technology in the accountability framework in today's Rajasthan social accountability law, actually, there's a big role for technology because there's a whole segment on auto approvals, auto verifications, deemed approvals. These are all second generation, third generation. I don't think there is any other state that has it. But without its safeguards of how you are using AI and artificial intelligence, without the safeguards of knowing what are the algorithms that are being put into place to include or exclude someone and auto-include someone, without debates around that, today, again, you will exclude masses of people and get into great disaster. So with technology, we have to be very careful of democratizing technology, of making sure that the people who are to benefit or not are brought in and those safeguards are there. Within the Rajasthan law, there are many things. It is a great step forward. It's taken us 10 years and 2 budget announcements and 1 in their manifesto for us to reach this point where they put it in public domain and they say they're going to bring it in the budget session. People like you, we appeal to. I'll send material and I'll send their public announcement, which is a full-page ad, as well as our briefing note on the law. There are many things which are just not there. They're mentioned, but there's no accountability within the accountability law. So the dates, the times, all those they want to leave to rules, and you all know why that is done by many people. And so if all of you were to write in, it would be very, very useful because it's not just for Rajasthan, it's for the whole country that it would be a breakthrough. Last thing I want to say, in 2 last things, sorry. One is that especially when I speak to a set of very progressive bureaucrats and others who are connected with the bureaucracy, with implementation, with policy making, I think one thing that we must understand is actually the failure of delivery is the failure of the bureaucracy. And today I see in social audits, not just in Rajasthan, but in other places, it's not that people don't know. It's not that people haven't taken risks to speak out. It's the people who take salaries, who know everything, but just are today under the thumb of the local MLA and the political system. And somewhere what we said, a bureaucrat will stand, a bureaucracy is there to bring the constitution and implement it. So whether it is from hate speech and communal riots, which is causing havoc all around, or to things like simple delivery of basic services. Even there, to take action against, Gayathri ji is talking about social audit, to take action today against even one Rozgar Sahayak, MLAs start calling and people start bending. Somewhere there has to be a system, and that only the bureaucracy can introspect to get back to the Mr. Shankarans of the world and the Mr. Rajus in large numbers across the world. That's absolutely essential. And because that's not happening is why we are looking for legal mechanisms. They won't all work, but they will empower us somewhat. That's what the accountability law does. It empowers that person to pursue his or her own case so that they are not stuck as a dead pensioner with no way of where to go or how to go. It gives that kind of opening. I want to end with Dr. Ambedkar's, I won't say the quote because it's a bit long, but his understanding of democracy, where he said it's not just a political democracy we want. There are very famous lines of Dr. Ambedkar, where he said that we are entering a life of inequalities. We will have political and contradictions. We will have political equality through the vote, but we will not have economic equality and we will not have social equality. And that will threaten our very basic structure. I think that understanding is very important. But next paragraph that he spoke just before the Constitution came in was he said we need a social democracy where liberty, equality, and fraternity work as a triumvirate, that they work together. And to us, as we did social audits, if you throw things in an unequal society and you say that this will work on its own, it won't. It won't unless you empower the woman in a gungat to speak. It won't until you say that the dignity of the last minority or the Gumantu Jati or someone else will be specially protected in a collective. Then you have social democracy, where you specially help those who need that, who support those to be equal on that platform. So that idea of Ambedkar is what we hope a social accountability must aim to do. None of us are perfect at being able to do it, and we live in a very unequal society. I want to end there. If there's no time, don't show the film. If there's time, do show the 4-minute film. It'll give you an idea of how people have mobilized. There has been a 100-day yatra in 2016 where we were beaten up. This is not of that. That's a separate film. This is a film from this yatra was stopped twice because of COVID, but it went through regardless. And it shows how people are mobilized for these issues. So if you feel like, and otherwise we'll just send the details.
हिंदुस्तान में और कुछ हो ना हो, अच्छे कानूनों की कोई कमी नहीं। हम लोगों के लिए बनाई पॉलिसीज, योजनाओं को हर जगह पहुंचा पाए या नहीं, नीतियां और योजनाएं बहुत हैं और अच्छी। सरकारें बदलती रहती हैं और हर सरकार बहुत सी योजनाएं और लोक सेवाएं देने का वादा करती है। प्रॉब्लम और तकलीफ ये है कि ये कागज पर ही रह जाती है और एक आम हिंदुस्तानी अपने हकों के लिए दफ्तर दर दफ्तर ये जवाब किसको देंगे? भारतीय जनतंत्र में जन ही सर्वोपरि होता है, सबसे ऊपर माना जाता है। लेकिन सच ये है कि आज जन पर तंत्र हावी है। आज राजस्थान से शुरू होकर देश भर के लोग एक नए कानून की मांग कर रहे हैं। वही लोग जिन्होंने देश को राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन यानी सूचना का अधिकार दिलवाया था। अब मांग है सरकारी लोगों की अकाउंटेबिलिटी या जवाबदेही की। जनता मांगे जवाबदेही कानून, ताकि जनता जब अपने हकों को लेकर सवाल करे तो उनको जवाब तो मिले ही, साथ में जो भी सरकारी कर्मचारी या अधिकारी या नेता अपना काम न करे तो उससे सवाल किया जा सके और काम न करने पर उस पर पेनल्टी हो। इस कानून की मांग के लिए राजस्थान के लोग पूरे देश की ओर से एक यात्रा निकाल रहे हैं, जवाबदेही यात्रा। शहर शहर जाकर लोगों की शिकायतें समझ रहे हैं, उनको नोट कर रहे हैं, उन्हें लेकर जिला कलेक्टर तक पहुंचा रहे हैं और जवाबदेही कानून की मांग कर रहे हैं। हर काम की जिसके लिए इन सरकारी लोगों को तनख्वाह मिलती है, जवाबदेही होनी चाहिए, अकाउंटेबिलिटी होनी चाहिए। सुनने में कितना आसान लगता है, कितना मुश्किल है। इसी मुश्किल को आइए आसान बनाते हैं, लोकतंत्र को, डेमोक्रेसी को मजबूत करते हैं। लोकतंत्र जिन लोगों से बनता है उनको ऊपर उठाते हैं। वक्त आ गया है, एक जवाबदेही कानून बनाते हैं। आप भी हिंदुस्तान हिंदुस्तान में जहां भी रहते हैं अपने इलाके में सवाल उठाइए और जवाबदेही आंदोलन से जुड़िए, क्योंकि सवाल बहुत हैं, अब जवाब चाहिए और कल नहीं आज चाहिए।
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the correction and for your wonderful exposition from the grassroots, what exactly is happening on both on the transparency and the accountability front. Now we'll go on to Dr. A. Ravindra. Dr. A. Ravindra is an IAS officer of 1965 batch, and he began his career in the field in the districts and went on to become the Chief Secretary to Government of Karnataka in 2002. That is, he was the head of the government bureaucracy in the state. Holding a PhD in development studies and specializing in the urban sector, including water management, he was responsible for introducing several governance reforms such as rationalizing property tax system through the self-assessment scheme and mobilizing resources for urban infrastructure through municipal bonds. He was instrumental in initiating the Kaveri water supply project, stage 4, and the metro rail project for Bengaluru. After retirement, Dr. Ravindra has served as Deputy Chairman, Karnataka State Planning Board and Senior Visiting Fellow at IIM Bangalore. Currently, he heads the Center for Sustainable Development, a non-profit organization, and Chairman, Public Affairs Center, Bangalore. Dr. Ravindra has published several papers and articles on urban public policy issues and wrote many books. His books include Urban Land Policy, Dance of Democracy, and a monograph on the Kaveri water dispute. Thanks a lot, sir, for accepting our invite, and we look forward to listening to you from your vast field experience and bureaucratic experience. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for inviting me in the first place to this very important conversation on transparency and accountability, which form two basic tenets or principles of administration, really. And as the two previous speakers have traversed a wide ground, I'll confine myself to highlighting a few issues based on my own experience, having spent long years in government and seen the other side of the picture. Well, as we all know, RTI Act came into force in 2005. Let me say that even before that, in a couple of years before 2005, around 2000 or so, Karnataka took the initiative to pass its own Right to Information Act. I'll narrate one experience in the sense the act was passed with somewhat similar provisions, making available the right to information for the citizen, seeking information, and so on and so forth. But it was not being enforced for the simple reason that the rules were not framed. Unless the rules are framed, as you know, prescribing the procedure, the forms concerned, etc., the act doesn't really come into force. So when I became Chief Secretary, I thought first, let us finalize the rules. So we drafted the rules and took it to the cabinet. In the cabinet, I was trying to explain the provisions of the rules, etc. Then the minister started questioning, saying that why this, why that, why should we give this information or this right to the citizens and things like that. And I said, you see, it is only your own assembly that has passed this bill, and the act has already come into force. Now you can't just raise those basic questions. And now we'll have to go ahead with the rules. Maybe with some changes, the rules were approved. That's a different matter. But the essential point is that those in power don't like to part with information pertaining to the programs they are implementing or their own individual information points. I mean, that is a very important thing that we must remember. I have seen so many people who are very vociferous in claiming all these things. When they all come to power, their attitude changes. Then it becomes more, trying to protect one's own rights. that apart. I mean, let us now come to the basic issues. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the contentious issues have already been referred to by the speakers. I'll give you two examples, where I try to grapple with this problem of transparency and accountability. When I was the administrator to the Bangalore City Corporation, I was worked as administrator and also as commissioner. I found one of the biggest problems, as you know, was this transparency in procurement, that is, contracts particularly. As you know, in all cities, now taking up road works in particular is an issue where there has been no transparency. Contracts, calling for tenders, and so much so even the people didn't know what was why see the roads are giving way, and what is the potholes appear every year in Bangalore even till this day. So the quality of roads was poor, and I thought I should do something about it. So when we took up some roads for relaying or formation, etc., I engaged some good consultants to prepare in the first place a proper document for tendering or for calling for bids. So we prepared what I thought was quite scientific and all that, and we called for tenders. Now, on the last day, I was just waiting to see how many bids were there, and I thought this time we'll certainly be able to provide better quality roads. But on the last day of the tender, after the time was over, you will be shocked to know that we did not receive even a single bid, not even a single tender. I think the contractors had all ganged up because, they felt under the conditions prescribed, they'll not be able to, make their own, profits, their expected profits or whatever it is. I need not tell you, I think, the nexus that is built up over the year, which continues till this day, is between the politician, the bureaucrat, and the contractor or the businessman or whatever it is. I think Mr. Nikhil Dey said finally that, it is the bureaucracy has failed. I agree. I mean, to a large extent, bureaucracy has failed in this connection. But there have been also a lot of efforts and attempts. I mean, one or two examples were given of persons like Mr. Shankaran and all that, who have struggled, I must say, to bring in greater transparency in the working of the government. So that was one. And even later, I tried the same thing after a couple of years. And there again, we got into problems with the contracts. I will not go into the details. But another more telling incident, I'll narrate. That is, I was chairman of the Bangalore Development Authority for some time. So when I went, as soon as I was posted there, within a few days, I found a large number of visitors coming, saying all sorts of grievances. I did, because, the BDA, like the DDA in Delhi, is responsible for housing in the sense, here in Bangalore, the practice was to acquire land, develop sites, and allot sites to the citizens. They build this housing themselves. So they said, we allotted, we applied, we got, either we didn't get down here anything for years together, where we have not got the title deeds, we are not able to build, and so on and so forth. So after a few days, one citizens forum or somebody, even I don't remember the name, they came and said, they invited me to a meeting saying that we'll explain to you the problems that we are facing and all that. So I went there and I was shocked to find that I thought it was a small meeting, then there was a large gathering. And people started firing questions saying that BDA is the most corrupt body. We can't get anything done and we don't know what to do and things like that. It was a kind of an assault. So I was at a loss to say whatever it was, because I had not understood the issues also in depth, because I spent hardly about a month or so. But then instead of being defensive, I said, yes, there may be corruption. But they only said, we can try to tackle it only not on ourselves. BDI by itself, government by itself will not be in a position to do that. If the people also cooperate, it is a two-way traffic. The person gives money and somebody takes money. But there are a lot of other problems. I'm not going to details except that. And then I said, okay, we can have a separate discussion or we can go into the details. So some of the, the people's, groups like some associations, NGOs, a few of them came for the meeting, and then we had a lot of discussion, and finally we decided to set up a forum. It was called Swabhimana, where representatives of the government, that is government agencies, the resident associations, and some others, from civil society, were all part of it. And we took up certain issues pertaining to the city, like waste management and so on. But another important thing was, I said, any questions relating to corruption also can, it can be brought before this forum. And after some time, they started demanding that, no, you see, we would like to see the files. That is the right to information. This is all before the Information Act came into force, either in Karnataka or anywhere else. Then I said, if it pertains to you, anybody aggrieved about his own case, I am prepared to show the file to him. So I set up a small cell separately, and they started asking all sorts of files. They wanted to see this file, that file. For a few days, they came and saw, and then they had very little to comment. Because, you see, on paper, things will be all right in government, as you know. But actual during implementation, all the mischief takes place. Whether it is unsatisfactory quality of roads or any project, and things like that. So the real question comes down to, as I think somebody said in the beginning, implementation. Even the act itself, the implementation part. See, first, there is a provision which says that government suo motu should declare or should announce any new policy that is framed, or any big program, which costs a lot of money and all. That is hardly done. Even till this day, that's not done at all. I was trying to do something wherever I was, but as I said at that time, the act was not in force. So people demanding the right, for instance, what Mr. Nikhil Dey was saying, or even earlier, Gayathri, about the capacity of the people to really see, not just ask questions, ask for information, but to see that it is given, the right type of information is given, and how to extract that information. And that is still a question, because there are hardly any people, even educated people in urban areas. I keep telling them, you're not asking. But nowadays I find, there has been a lot of progress also, I must say, especially after digitization, as everybody was saying. In the sense, every website of every department now contains some basic information about their own department or the board or whatever it is, government agency, the procedures, for instance, for payment of property tax, let us say, or many things are done digitally. That itself, as I must say, brought down a lot of corruption. As you know, I think the railways people here would know very well that it was in the railways that first, before this online thing or computerization was brought in, even to get a seat or buy a ticket, there used to be huge queues and a lot of corruption used to go on. So digitalization has improved a lot. I think I will not go into details. All of you will know many other things. So coming to the actual the accountability, transparency is one. Accountability, the system that has been enforced even legally is a checks and balances in a democracy. As you know, even the three wings of government, legislature, executive, judiciary, the separation of powers. And on the other side, on the question of a lot was said about audit, it is said there are, the 3 or 4 C's that we should be in India, where checks are exercised. Number one is the C&AG audit, as you know, control and audience audit. Number two, there is a civil vigilance commissioner, central vigilance commissioner, and a state's vigilance department, wings or lokayukta, whatever it is nowadays. Then you have the CBI or NIA or whatever it is, investigating agencies for economic offenses and so on and so forth. And finally, there are another C is the big C is the courts. Everyone goes and approaches to the courts and things like that. But let me say here, for instance, speaking of courts, when we are speaking so much about transparency, one of the most important elements is the question of appointments or recruitment. The recruitment process is totally or to a large extent non-transparent in many departments, in many states, except UPSC to a considerable extent. I would say many other recruitment agencies, we know the cases in Madhya Pradesh, even in Karnataka, it's a KPSC, Karnataka Public Service Commission is a lot of scams and things like that. So here, the current debate that is going on, you must have been, all of you must be noticing, is about, for instance, appointment of one election commissioner. I think it is current news, so no details need to be said. So that has again given rise to the question of the appointment of judges, judicial appointment system that is there. So now you find there is a kind of a debate between the executive and the judiciary. So how much of transparency is there even in appointment of judges is an important question, because almost everyone, in the public have a lot of faith in the courts. I must tell you, and by and large, courts have performed a wonderful job of protecting the citizens' rights, etc. But still, there are a lot of misgivings. We know there's corruption. Judiciary is not free from corruption. So agencies everywhere, whether it is executive or legislature or judiciary, transparency is still a big question in spite of the Right to Information Act and in spite of a lot of progress made. As I said, nowadays, because of digitization and technology, you can't hide many things. That is one thing. So people somehow, come to know of things. That's why today you find in the news, particularly in the TV channels, almost every day the news is about some scam or the other. You are exposing something. That means you are trying to hide, somebody is trying to hide something, and now you're exposing it, and whether how much of truth is there or not. That's why I speak about media trial and all that. There are a lot of issues surrounding this, and this is also very, very important. So finally, let me say just a couple of words about what sort of further steps need to be taken, both in respect of transparency and accountability. As I said, one is we will have to strengthen this checks and balances system, which will happen in course of time. But number one, I think there is need for reforms. When you talk about reforms, political reforms or electoral reform. See, unless electoral reforms are carried out, and so political corruption cannot be weeded out. And so long as political corruption continues, you'll have bureaucratic corruption, and you'll have corruption in the private sector, everywhere that nexus will continue. So how to do that is, again, probably will need another session. Except to say that, for instance, now the collection of money by the political parties. In the first place, the need for reforming the political parties is very important. Unless that is done, again, it's all linked one to the other. So now you have this system of electoral bonds. There are again questions about its transparency. How is money collected? They'll announce, okay, so much collected by each party, but the source they do not want to disclose. And when matter was taken up, they said, no, we are out of the jurisdiction of the Right to Information Act. So in practice, this is what is happening. So whatever may be the other things we may be discussing. But yes, at the grassroots level, because of what happened in Rajasthan and everywhere else, this demand from the people, things have improved to some extent, especially because of technology. Otherwise, even today, I do hear stories from the MNRG project. There are a lot of people in areas, especially advanced districts, where they have irrigation and all that. No, money is being paid without any attendance. People don't turn up. It's all bogus. and money is still paid. So the role of the civil society also becomes very important. Yeah, I think a lot of work has been done, as Mr. Nikhil Dey was mentioning. In every state, even in Karnataka, we have protests are there, and because of that, a lot of information is coming out. Things are improving, but still, this decentralization in the true sense of the term again is not taken place, especially in urban areas. See, at least in rural areas, Panchayati Raj, there is Gram Sabha and so on and so forth, something. In urban decentralization has not taken place at all, because the politicians in the state, at the state level, the chief minister and other ministers concerned, do not want to part power over particularly urban areas, big cities, the land deals and things like that. So, so as I said, electoral reforms are extremely important. Similar, see, on administrative side, bureaucratic reform, there are any number of suggestions. Administrative Reform Commission reports are there, and all these things are there. So I'll stop here because of the lack of time, except saying finally that ultimately it will come down to the question of ethics. Persons, unless there is individual reform, there is more awareness about personal behavior, and it's very difficult to get rid of all this, whether it is corruption or you say accountability itself becomes a problem, because everyone wants to protect himself or herself. So on an individual basis also, I think there is need for a realization that there is need for ethical kind of a movement where even the NGOs and others stress on converting our own selves. That in a civil society, if that takes place on a large scale, automatically we'll be able to exert greater pressure on the leaders, political leaders, or the bureaucracy. Ultimately, I think it is people's pressure which will work, in my experience, because that's where I think finally, whether it is a politician or a bureaucrat, finally bends down. If armed laws were withdrawn or things like that. So that I would say in some, these kind of reforms, if they are attempted, that will lead to better transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravindra sir. Thanks a lot for your overall talk, for indicating your experience, mixing your experience, and also your own background in various service delivery mechanisms. Now, we'll open the questions to the audience, and the audience would ask the questions on the YouTube, and then we'll be relaying it to them. So one of the questions that was asked is, transparency and availability of info tends to improve accountability, but why is the tendency of transparency and availability of information so lethargic in India, apart from demand supply problem, as Gayathri madam told? The three panelists may please elaborate. Basically, what the questionnaire is asking is why there is so much of lethargy in making information available, and also making people accountable in the accountability. So, who would you like to respond, sir?
I think I have covered in my talk. I have covered some of the reasons and all that. So
yeah.
So it is the nexus that operates.
Yeah, it's covered already, some parts of it, but any response from Nikhil and Gayathri?
I think if the others can respond, maybe I'll come in later.
Yeah.
I'll come in just quickly. I think there was a very nice input here in the chat box about the culture. Everything has been gupt and secretive, and the social structures which divide people and sharing of knowledge and information is a part, of why we don't also share information. So the cultural aspect cannot be overlooked. And also the fact that Nikhil was talking about our bureaucracy's commitment to constitution, very much there, but I think over a period of time, it has become upward accountability to political bosses. So there's a huge amount of resurgence of the neutrality of bureaucracy and the steel spine of bureaucracy. There are people, I'm not saying that there are no people, but by and large, like we say, corruption in India is a way of life. the ability, the concept of bureaucracy being accountable to a constitution as opposed to a political boss, and strengthened by recruitment processes, posting and transfer processes. Also make for lesser amount of accountability towards the citizen. So it's more of upward accountability rather than accountability as envisioned in the constitution. And the fact that consequences, the ability to enforce consequences is very limited. I was very happy to see, I'm talking to you from Jharkhand, that Jharkhand High Court is one of the few courts which have used the definition of public authority and imposed penalty on the public authority as opposed to PIO. So, but there needs to be much more of those sanctions. And lastly, I think the fact that, it's like I've said when I was looking at dowry deaths, it's the women who needed to stand up. The men always hid behind their families and their mothers and came up to be trying to project themselves as smelling roses. So here what Ravindran sir said and what Nikhil is doing in action, a two-way accountability. So if there is no reason for administration or bureaucracy or consequence for not being accountable, the loss is that of us as people, as citizens. And so therefore the pressure of citizenship needs to be much more, and of educated people, I think, much more.
Thank you, Gayathri. Nikhil, would you like to respond, or we go to the next question?
No, I think let's go to the next question. We can keep talking about it. Is true that there is lethargy, but lethargy, if there's law, there should not be lethargy. So we come back to the same issue of implementation.
Okay. Many bureaucrats in private feel that there is a limit to transparency for their effective performance, as they cannot write freely their thoughts on a policy or its implementation. Request the panelists to comment on this. Sir, would you like to take, sir? Ravindra sir?
Okay, because I was a bureaucrat for a long time. You see, as I said, initially when bureaucrats, when they join the service, they're all full of idealism. They want to be not only promote this transparency, accountability, but during the course of the career, after a few years, as they say, sahavasa dosham, how the others are behaving, the interaction with politicians, other senior bureaucrats, etc. It is the environment, the system itself has become so corrupt. See, that is the whole problem. So where do you begin? So a lot of efforts have yielded results which are limited. It doesn't really move forward. Unless, I would say, as I said, it has to start from the top. Let us be clear. If the political system improves, or if there is transparency there, if there's accountability there, automatically the bureaucracy will also get corrected. When that is not there, even today my own colleagues in the government keep saying, things have become more difficult because politicians now want to have a say in everything, whether they have the power to do it or not. And oral instructions are given. So it becomes very difficult unless, the bureaucrats are so strong as to stand up and say it is not possible, etc. So the system needs correction from several angles. Although the Prime Minister may say at the center, maybe their own cabinet or some senior bureaucrats, it's all, there's a lot of honesty, integrity and all that. But down the line, it's very difficult. That's why for the common man, like today, especially in large cities, it's become very difficult. So bureaucracy, yes, I agree. In theory, there are things are wrong. Many things are wrong, but the struggle that is going on, that, as I would say, is how do we correct the system? I think that is the fundamental question I would pose. I would like others to comment on how do we, reform the political bureaucratic system, and also take into account the social system. as it was said, social system, social economic inequality is one. But how do the people behave? How does the private sector behave? We are talking about transparency in government. Let us not forget the private sector, there is hardly any transparency. You take, for example, let us say, drug industry, medicines. The huge, big drug companies, the amount of profits they make, and what is the information that is given to the people? You don't even know. You see, even the medicine, the bottles that you buy, and very small print, you can't even read that. Or even what the doctor prescribes, you can't read. See, there is a big nexus between prescriptions of the medicines, the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, etc. I can expand this education sector, health sector in particular today. It has become so expensive for people. And public systems also have their own deficiencies, So, as I said, we'll have to look at this in a total perspective.
Yeah, other two, Gayathri and Nikhil.
Well, I think I have never found it a problem. I've always given speaking orders. You need to be willing to pay the consequences. And that is what you do. That is what you do when you come in and the consequences, I think, for bureaucracy is not big. You're transferred out to what other people might think as not an important job, or transferred out to another city at the cost of government. So I don't really feel that that's a great issue. But I also don't agree very much with what Ravindra sir was saying about private sector and all, because you see the king or the top is the government. If drug industry is not being transparent, then somebody in government who's supposed to enforce the transparency is not doing the job. I remember during COVID when resident welfare associations, and today they act as parallel governments, not of tyranny. The municipal commissioners to whom they were appealed to just threw up their hands and said, we will not look at it. Or registrars of cooperative societies under which they are incorporated are not to be found. So if the people who are supposed to be enforcers themselves are found to be ineffective or unwilling, then rest of the market segments will reflect that.
Nikhil, any responses from you?
Yeah, I have two things to say. One is that I think what we have to work towards, and we have to recognize that and understand that, and somewhere in that chat I saw a reference to that as well, is that we have to move towards a culture of openness and secrecy, to openness and away from a culture of secrecy, which is what we have. So the RTI is a kind of an instrument that flew in the face of a culture of secrecy, of feudalism, of colonialism in our administration and in our society both. And there has to be a time when we should not have any fear about taking decisions in the open. And this relates to the second part of what I want to say, what Raviji said, that today the bureaucracy holds itself so helpless. And he said the Supreme Court has done a reasonably good job. Now, it's the only time the Supreme Court does a good job is when it asserts its independence. And often what I find is that the bureaucracy, yes, there are mechanisms, yes, there is transfer, yes, there are other ways in which it has been put under pressure, but it is a very, very powerful, actually, what can be done to a bureaucrat beyond a transfer. And we have these heroes in the bureaucracy who do stand up. Gayathri ji, what she's saying is completely right. And I know of so many bureaucrats who say that if it weren't for the RTI, we would be forced to do many other things. We simply tell the politician, yeah, RTI niklega, this will come out in RTI. And therefore, it is for good bureaucrats a very important tool to be able to help, saying that not only must we do what's right, but we must be shown to be doing what's right. And that's the only thing that will bring about a culture of openness, participation, and to some extent accountability.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's certainly we need a culture of openness, and bureaucrats should stand up. But the point is the system is such that majority of them are not able to do that. And you see, this is something to be really studied. I think, why is this happening? Is it really they're under such great pressure from the political bosses that they're not able to function? I can also say transfer is a very important instrument they use. Suddenly, you do something, if they find, he is honest and he's upright and doing something, if that is transferred and another person who is pliable is brought in, then you see, it's like a breakdown of the system and what you are aiming for, culture of openness. So how do we strengthen it is the question. A lot of PC training programs are held. A lot of things are being done. I'm not saying no, but in spite of it, so this is a subject you need another session for it. I don't think we can.
Yeah, just one little bit, if you allow me, Ravi, on
Yeah,
the
please.
systemic. So after having said that, these are personal decisions that people like Mr. Ravindra would have taken to stand up to pressures. And it's very tough to stand up to pressures many a time. And one can from the outside say, for example, that transfer doesn't cost much, but from a familial perspective, it could cost a lot in various ways. But what I see systemically, which even external services not do, is we don't have a system of recognition and reward for the right purpose. And many a time, the civil society organizations, I remember when I was a very young probationer in Department of Supplies, even before RTI, a lot of companies came and said that there's no transparency in payment. And people who pay you get paid first. And I started putting in everyday notices outside that this is the order of bills that have come. And lo behold, in about 2-3 months' time, the very people who asked for transparency were getting to get me transferred out, right? And the battles are what you fight alone. And there is absolutely no system as a human being that a human needs of recognition even or support of any kind. So a bureaucrat who is standing up for what is right or ignoring the consequences still is a human being. So systemically, I don't mean just in the administrative system, as various stakeholders in the system need to also think about what this human being needs as a support to be able to stand up to what is laid down in the constitution or in the laws. Sorry, I took a lot of time.
No
Yeah,
problem.
I think
No problem.
that is right in a way. I mean, I think if you have more questions, you can go to that. Otherwise, we'll get lost in this debate. Is there any question?
We're
I
going
think
to the next question, sir. We're going to the next question.
Complete in another next
minutes. We'll just come. This is a question on the culture, which you have partly addressed. So part of it, I'll just come back to it. And then if you want, you can add to it. Bilwada Principles brings the social religious culture to the center stage. Caste structure of India, which does not treat 25% Indians as human beings at all. So the dispensers of rule of law wouldn't dispense justice to this segment as a matter of culture. How far transparency helped to change this inhuman culture in the experience of the panelists? The discrimination being shown socially, especially on the caste basis, has transparency reduced that? Is the basic question that is being posed. And what is your experience? Nikhil?
I'll just say that the numbers of people who are from we see many high-profile cases in RTI which come to the commissions. And there we also see some of these people who are blackmailers and some of them who are sort of, they were blackmailers already and they found RTI to be a useful instrument to put pressure. But the vast number of very marginalized people, including those who are, whether they are Dalits or whether they are people from nomadic communities who are even more marginalized, or whether they are women in all these communities, there are many of them who have continuously raised questions of transparency because it helps correct the imbalance of power. It establishes in public domain what is happening, how they are being exploited. So from bonded labor to people on Dalit atrocity cases to everyone else, they're continuously using RTI. And today, lawyers who work on human rights cases, the first things they do is look at what are the kinds of RTIs that can be put. So I'm just saying that absolutely, this is a demand. Rajasthan showed that it was not a demand. All over the world, RTI used to be freedom of expression, and freedom of expression of who? Either media people or researchers or some very well-read urban people. It was the first time in the world that the Indian movement looked at it from the point of view of marginalized people, turning the tables on those who had been ruling them and saying that we have an equal share of power. So RTI is actually a demand for a share of power. And that's what marginalized people will continuously do, always. And whatever they can use in that respect, they can. And transparency is one of the best ways. I'll very quickly say one quick story. There was once we were speaking to a group of bureaucrats while RTI had not come in. But they were greatly exercised. In Jaipur, we went from a dharna. And one of our colleagues called Lal Singh, it's a famous quote, it's out on the net also. They finished with Aruna and me and said, okay, you've spoken now 15 minutes each. Now these two should finish in 2 minutes each. There were other people. And Lal Singh said, मैं तो 1 minute में ही मेरी बात कह दूंगा. Said, हम लोग सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार मिल जाए, तो क्या हम जिएंगे या नहीं जिएंगे? आप लोग सोचते हैं कि सूचना का अधिकार हो जाए तो आपकी कुर्सी रहेगी या नहीं रहेगी? We were addressing a very agitated set of bureaucrats about RTI, and then he said, लेकिन हम सबको मिलके सोचना चाहिए कि क्या ये देश रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा, और उसमें पारदर्शिता ही एक आधार है. That is the only basis for us to take a decision on conflicting priorities and competing priorities. So absolutely, it allows the poor to fight for justice. It allows the marginalized to fight for justice. It allows the caste oppressed to fight for justice. And that's why they use it, and that's why they stand by it.
I would second that. I've seen many grassroots level people, talking about PDS shops, PDS, what has come, ration card not being given, in terms of, women suddenly who is widowed, whose land is being distributed amongst the family and completely disowning her, looking at RTI and getting panchayat pramukhs to come and be answerable. Yes, but I think still we are long way to go. In my view, I think the urban group is perhaps not using it enough to hold urban local governments and politicians, unless it affects them in a very not a GNG manner, but it's something which is personal. Your land registration or your patta registration, property registration, those kind of things are affected.
So, any response from you, or you go on to the next?
I mean, yeah, I see. The Right to Information Act has certainly not just provided the right; it has stimulated a lot of movements and all that. Different level, grassroots level, in terms of different marginalized castes or sections of society. I mean, and a lot of not only information people have benefited through, especially in the question of PDS and all that, and with digitalization now, I think, and this direct transfer system, direct benefit transfer and all that, things have, there is no distinction between caste, community and all that, when you speak about digitalization and transfer of whether it is information or cash or the welfare schemes, let us say. How efficiently the welfare schemes are functioning is again a matter for study. I mean, yeah, there have been some malpractices, but there are also a lot of people have benefited from these schemes, I must say. But of course, the larger issue of inequalities and all that continues, and we find even till today, some people not being allowed to draw water from the same well and things like that. They continue. Social reform is also important. I mean, let me make one thing clear: law by itself cannot achieve everything. Law is an instrument that enables people to proceed along the right ways and achieve what they want. But social reform is also important, like dowry, for instance. There is an act, but still we know in practice it continues. So that is where I think civil society has to play a big role, change of attitudes and things like that. So it's a combination of, I would say, law or the legal rights given on the one hand, and the social education on the other. I mean, that is important. And ultimately people's, ability to assert, to demand, and to get what they want.
Thank you, sir. Final few questions. Jan Suchna transaction based online and open, another processor. Are they not just rights related, ignoring the duty of both the governments and the people? As aspect almost fully. Request the panelists to respond. Are we only talking of rights and not duties of the government and the people? Is what the question is about.
Yeah, the Constitution itself provides for duties also. It's not merely rights. The directive principles, I think, duties have also been brought in. Duties and responsibilities of citizens. When I referred to the private sector and people's attitudes and all, I said, this is one thing on ethics and all. See, it's a question of, are we performing our duties properly? Are we only talking about rights? It is both. They are two sides of the same coin. So while demanding rights, one should also bear in mind his or her own responsibilities. That is why even on the RTI Act, we also find, I myself had experience, a lot of questions, more mischievous questions. They just ask for the heck of it, and or they want to fix somebody. They're individualized questions, and half of them are like that. So, that part is also there. So I agree. I mean, it's duties are also very important, and one should look at it as a whole. Both rights and duties should go together.
So I think it's a very long debate. I think, again, this is an issue that would make a very interesting separate discussion in and of itself. We live in a society where working people have been told that it is their duty to work and others' duty to benefit from that. It's others' privilege to benefit from that. It's a very strange hierarchical society which uses the term duty, and I find that same term duty being misused in today's debate. The Constitution puts it very differently. The Constitution fundamental duties actually say that you should have communal harmony as a big duty. You should have solidarity the way it's there in the preamble, that you protect the dignity of every individual as a duty. Those are our duties much more. And the duties, when government servants talk about citizens' duties, it's a very strange question. Whether government servants, I mean public servants, whether it is an elected representative or an official, they are people who have chosen to be in the realm of duty. They get paid for that. They get votes for that and paid for that. It is there. And I think it's a citizen's duty to demand their own individual and collective rights. And to say that, let us say the farmers were not, what were the farmers doing? Raising a very important issue. Or what are people who were on the CA protest saying that our constitution is being undermined and we are being marginalized? So I think this is a very, or when Dalits are protesting against atrocities, or when women are saying that they want a more secure environment, all of that is they're performing their duties. The rest of us, actually, privileged India doesn't, and privileged India doesn't even get on the streets to protest. So I just say, because I'm saying all this because it's in the context of a broader discussion that the Prime Minister has also raised several times about Andolan Jeevis, and since I'm an Andolan Jeevi, and sometimes Andolan Jeevis even being called urban Nakshal, for which there is no term and no definition at all. So I just feel that there are people who are laying their life on the line to do work for public people, for public causes. They are actually performing a duty. And I want to assert, I'm not talking about myself, I'm saying that there lots who I know who perform an enormous duty for society, and for them to be told in some way that these demands for people's rights is a problem, is itself something that we all need to address. And this is not to take away the mental duties are there; they're important. But I just think that the way this debate is placed undermines that concept.
Okay, Gayatri, any response from your side?
No, I think I agree. I definitely agree with Nikhil, because the kind of questions that are asked are the duties of citizenship. And I think it's something that we need to be proud of and be grateful for, because for all of us, it's a public good in terms of asking questions and pushing performance and accountability and results, because it benefits the society at large. But I think Nikhil also said that doesn't undermine the other citizenship duty. I think in the larger discourse, one brings that up because of discomfort, perhaps, with the transparency and accountability questions. But like, for example, Ravindra ji said about bringing about transparency in procurement. I remember when I was heading ASI, my God, even today, if you go and see in Mehroli in Delhi, you go and clean there's this beautiful step well, and you go and clean it, and next day it would be filled with rubbish. And when you go and ask your people to say that isko cleanliness mein dhyan do, they say, madam, there's no point in terms of cleaning anything, because iska koi result hi nahi hoga. So there are many areas in which the citizenship role, even ourselves, for example, when we go and pay bribes for our driving license, or even the so-called digitization, which makes arm's length the bribe, right? You go, someone takes a commission through a third-party digital agency for doing your land records, and we sort of are complicit in that. So these small things add up to a complicity in corruption. So from that perspective, I think also that discourse is also important, without in any way understating the importance of what Nikhil said.
As I said, I agree with all these arguments, but I said it is the system at the top level. As Nikhil Dey said about the privileged persons and the, let us say, underprivileged. That battle is going on. That is there. So all the more important that we try to come to grips with why is this happening, the system, how to break that privilege, the nexus of privileges, let us say, and put it in short. So this would certainly require not one, maybe 2 or 3 sessions, separate discussions. We should come to that. I think we should either close or go ahead, Mr. Babu.
Yeah, final question, sir. Final question. Actually, what is the state of these accountability bills? Are there any state governments or central government conceptualize them? And what is the state of the Rajasthan's accountability bill itself? Any knowledge on that, in that direction, from the panelists?
Yeah. So shall I speak? Because I think this particular, at least Rajasthan, I am aware,
Please,
but I'm also aware of some other places. So yeah, so this bill, the Rajasthan, the base of the Rajasthan bill was a bill drafted in 2011, which was placed in Parliament, which was called the Guaranteed Delivery of Public Services and Grievance Redress Bill. Now, there are many guaranteed public service delivery bills in many states, I think more than 17. But they fundamentally differ from the nature of this bill, because this says that accountability originates from a citizen's definition of their complaint, an actionable wrong in the Constitution, what's there in the concurrent list. Now, that bill in 2011 went to the standing committee. It got consensus support from all the parties, including the opposition and the ruling party. But yet in 2014, because there was a logjam in Parliament, and the current ruling party said, we will pass these laws when we come, that bill did not, unfortunately, get passed, and it lapsed. And the ruling party has not brought it in since. That formed the basis. The only other state that took parts of that law, Rajasthan took parts of the law to pass a right to hearing law, which will now be, I'll come to the Rajasthan example a little later. And then Bihar took parts of that law and passed a grievance redress law. It is a very interesting law. Bihar is the only state, and they put a whole framework into place, and it is of great help and value. And it actually came from a single comment that the Chief Minister Nitish Kumar at that time made, saying, I get these thousands of people who come to my darbar and I don't know what to do to sort it out. How can one make sure that people's issues are sorted out where they are and only policy issues come to me? So at that time, he started a process and took from that law much of what he took was from that law, even though much was left out. Now, no other state really has done either of this. Now, Rajasthan's situation is that it is going to repeal its service guarantee and right to hearing law to assimilate it within this. Rajasthan is also assimilating a social and performance audit authority within this law. So it's a comprehensive in a sense. Rajasthan government has been hesitant, I must say that, because the greatest resistance has been from some bureaucrats. And that's why I would like to repeat that all of you who are here were to write in, because they are taking comments till the 30th of November. I will send some comments in English and Hindi to the group, including the draft bill that they put up and the link to the draft bill. It would be very useful. The status is that they are saying that in this next budget session, which will be in mid-January, they are likely to bring it for passage, but we know the uncertainties of government, of people, of all those things. But they are definitely speaking of it, not once, but many times. And despite resistance, they seem to be saying that this time they will pass it. There are many shortcomings in the law. To give you just some examples, that they don't say in how many days an ETR will be given for a complaint. They don't have a proper information and facilitation center, which should have been part of the law. Everything is mentioned, but mentioned without anything being sure and proper. So there's a, again, not clearly defined how often it will take place and at which levels. I think they are saying that we'll do some of these corrections and amendments before they bring it to the assembly. We hope they will, but every voice would help. So, and I think the biggest breakthrough is whatever nature of law we'll get, it will enter back again onto these transparency accountability measures, which have gone to sleep actually since the Lokpal debate took place several years.
Let me add that in Karnataka, such a law has already passed long back about guarantee to services. And I think following the Bihar example, Karnataka also introduced another system called Sakala, that is delivery of services in time in Sakala. And for each department, the type of services to be given were identified, and the time limit was also prescribed. Delivery of a khata in 1 week, birth certificate in 3 days, and so on and so forth. And initially, there was a lot of enthusiasm that tried doing it. But over the time now, that has become almost redundant. Because I find in practice, you see, as I said, this law by itself doesn't guarantee. You see, the guarantee of services doesn't guarantee, because, see, on paper, for instance, if you go and check with a particular individual handling that particular service, he will say, yes, I have attended to this matter in time. Say in 1 week, what has he done? He has either sent the file upwards, or he has given a reply to the individual concerned saying that this is the position status. That does not provide the solution. That is not a satisfactory delivery of service. See, one must differentiate. This is where, in practice, what happens, we must see implementation part. But the law is essential, as I said. I mean, it certainly takes you, gives you a ride, and then you go and some progress is made and all that. So unless, as I said, the system itself needs to be looked at. What are the laws? What are the rules? And why are things functioning in such a manner? In spite of a law relating to guarantee of services, why are things not delivered? I'll give you another small example. The Bangalore City Corporation, for instance, has now introduced an app saying that any citizen, any grievance you have, you can just send it, in your to our app, and we will give you a reply immediately, almost instantaneously. Yes, the reply, it is acknowledged, saying that what happens is, yes, we have received, the matter is receiving attention or something like that. See, that doesn't mean the problem has been attended to. It has been, yes, we have received, we are taking note, it may take 1 week, it may take 1 month or whatever it is, the concerned department will deal with it. So this is how it goes round and round. So we need to cut a lot of levels, procedures. As I said, bureaucratic reform of systems and procedures in government is also important to cut down the delays and deliver services. And finally, let me say about accountability. As somebody was saying that, see, in government, there is no distinction between a person who is efficient, highly merited, and devoted, and a person who is lazy, lethargic, and does nothing, or even corrupt. There's very little. So some action is being taken, but then it's very difficult to, get rid of the person, who is inefficient and all that. The systems are such, opportunity of being heard, inquiry takes such a long time. Then he goes to the court and gets a stay order. So these are all the issues that we need to grapple.
A final question is on the extent and effectiveness of the social audit across the country. Rajasthan has done some good job in the social audit, but what is its extent and in other states, and its effectiveness as an instrument for performance? Any Nikhil or Gayathri?
Yeah, in Karnataka also some social audits are done, and certainly to some extent, some benefits are seen, but it is not on such a large scale. You see, for doing social audit, you also have to get the right type of persons from civil society, who are both good, efficient, they know the job, and at the same time, they have the integrity to say, this is what has happened. So that is I would say, not a very easy thing. But social audit has yielded some results, but stray results, I would say.
Rajasthan was a conceptual birthplace of social audit because the Johnson Bhai moved into a social audit framework. Andhra, Telangana, where Gayathri, what she talked about, was the institutionalization of it within government in very effective ways, and that's what made it move within the CAG into auditing standards. The CAG, by the way, has published the only social audit standards in the world, which the Supreme Court of India has endorsed as saying that those are the ones that should be sort of molded in ways for different schemes, but those same principles be used. But Rajasthan, I do want to tell you, and for all of you, it would be of interest, is that there is massive resistance to social audit. Maybe because it was a place where it was born, maybe because the sarpanches are so powerful. The last round of trying to get effective social audits done about 5 months ago, 6,000 sarpanches in their huge vehicles turned up and attacked those very parts of social audit that would make it. The reason I think it's effective in theory, but we still don't have either the administrative or political will to do it. And Andhra, Telangana should be congratulated for carrying on as long as they have, is that it actually sets off a set of people to share information of every work and every beneficiary. So it's visiting every work. So that kind of granular detail cannot have. And out of that comes things, but action taken is so poor, which is what in this accountability law we've tried to do, because people have to keep speaking out at risk to themselves, and then no action is taken on that except for bringing things in the public domain. Will collapse. therefore, what Raviji is saying is not wrong, that this is also, in a sense, just become an example of stray things happening. But it's got massive potential. It can do very well, should be spread to all, certainly social sector schemes, but it can be spread to other things. Meghalaya is for social audit. And if this law comes also, social audit will extend to all schemes automatically, all notified schemes and programs. So I think a lot needs to be done, much more promise than what is yet delivered. But it is an institutionalized way of involving people in being able to audit and evaluate and even secure their own rights and entitlements. Hamara paisa, hamara hisab.
Right. Thank you, Nikhil ji. So now it's time to close. I think it has been a wonderful session, getting experience from 3 experienced panelists from diverse experience backgrounds on a topic which is so large and so wide, and more number of views only can enrich it and make it more effective. So my thanks on behalf of Anekdhara to all the panelists, Ravindra sir, Gayathri madam, and Nikhil ji, for accepting our invite and giving illuminating talk and examples. Examples. My also thanks to audience who have stayed for 2 hours for listening to the talks and also asking intelligent, relevant and pertinent questions on the topic. We are also thankful to our design team, Joha Rawat and Shreya Rao, and our technical person, Sadi Ali, for enabling us to do this program. And at the end, we conclude this. And for next month, it is the topic is on the extent of rot in the electoral system and how to stem it. It will be on the December 25th, usually the last Sunday. And with this, we close this session. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gayathri ji. Thank you, Ravindra ji. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you, and enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.